And those reasons will continue to hold true long after our Title II experiment ends today. What are they? Well, the D.C. Circuit has offered its view. When it observed that Title II allows ISPs to offer filtered internet access, it also said that none were doing so because of what it said as fear of subscriber losses. In other words, market forces, not the Title II rules, are regulating this conduct. Now, there are some that will never accept market forces as a solution, either in the broadband marketplace or otherwise. But for them, today's order has some more good news. We're not relying on market forces alone. We're not giving ISPs free rein to dictate your online experience. Our decision today includes powerful legal checks. First, Americans will enjoy robust online protections. When the FCC classified broadband as a Title II service in 2015, it divested the Federal Trade Commission of 100% of its consumer protection authority over ISPs, including its ability to police ISPs that engage in unfair or deceptive practices. Repealing Title II will restore important protections for internet openness. Second, consumers will regain strong online privacy protections. Before the FCC stripped it of jurisdiction, the FTC, the nation's most experienced privacy enforcement agency, brought over 500 privacy enforcement actions, including against ISPs. By reversing Title II, consumers get those privacy protections back. Third, federal antitrust law will protect against discriminatory conduct by ISPs. As a former Obama administration FTC chairman recently said, this is a formidable hammer against anyone who would harmfully block, throttle, or prioritize traffic. Fourth, state consumer protection laws will apply and state attorney generals can bring actions against ISPs. These authorities will provide another strong set of legal protections against unfair business practices by ISPs. In short, this is no free-for-all. This is no Thunderdome. The FCC is not killing the internet. While I've spent most of my time today talking about the policy debate surrounding Title II, there's also a threshold legal question that the Commission must answer. Does Internet Access Service qualify as a Title I information service or Title II telecommunications service? Thankfully, I don't need to go beyond what the order itself says on this point. After all, in 2005, the Supreme Court expressly found that the FCC has authority to classify Internet Access Service as a Title I service. This remains the only classification blessed by the Supreme Court. So our decision today rests on sound legal footing. In closing, I want to look back 2 years ago to 2015 one more time. In October of that year, long before I became a commissioner, I gave a speech where I talked about the FCC's then recent Title II decision. I ended that speech by saying this: I'm optimistic the U.S. will return to the successful, light touch approach to the internet that spurred massive investments in our broadband infrastructure. Efforts are underway in both the courts and Congress to reverse the FCC's decision. And following next year's presidential election, the composition of the FCC could be substantially different than it is today. Now, 2 years ago, I certainly did not imagine that I would be part of the FCC's new composition. But I'm very grateful for this opportunity to serve. And I'm grateful that my optimism back then has proven to be well-founded. I'm glad to cast my vote today in favor of internet freedom. Thanks.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Rosenworcel.
Okay. Net neutrality is internet freedom. I support that freedom. I dissent from this rash decision to roll back net neutrality rules. I dissent from the corrupt process that has brought us to this point, and I dissent from the contempt this agency has shown our citizens in pursuing this path today. This decision puts the Federal Communications Commission on the wrong side of history, the wrong side of the law, and the wrong side of the American public. The future of the internet is the future of everything. That is because there is nothing in our commercial, social, or civic lives that has been untouched by its influence or unmoved by its power. And here in the United States, our internet economy is the envy of the world. This is because it rests on a foundation of openness. That openness is revolutionary. It means you can go where you want and do what you want online without your broadband provider getting in the way or making choices for you. It means every one of us can create without permission, build community beyond geography, organize without physical constraints, consume content we want, when and where we want it, and share ideas not just around the corner, but across the globe. I believe it is essential that we sustain this foundation of openness, and that is why I support net neutrality. Net neutrality has deep origins in communications law and history. In the era when communications meant telephony, every call went through, and your phone company could not cut off your call or edit the content of your conversations. This guiding principle of non-discrimination meant you were in control of the connections you make. This principle continued as time advanced, technology changed, and internet access became the dial tone of the digital age. So it was 12 years ago when President George W. Bush was in the White House that this agency first put its net neutrality policies on paper. In the decade that followed, the FCC revamped and revised its net neutrality rules, seeking to keep them current and find them a stable home in the law. In its 2015 order, the FCC succeeded because in the following year, in a 184-page opinion, the agency's net neutrality rules were fully and completely upheld in court. So our existing net neutrality policies have passed court muster. They are wildly popular. But today we wipe away this work, destroy this progress, and burn down time-tested values that have made our internet economy the envy of the world. As a result of today's misguided action, our broadband providers will get extraordinary new powers. They will have the power to block websites, the power to throttle services, and the power to censor online content. They will have the right to discriminate and favor the internet traffic of those companies with whom they have a pay-for-play arrangement, and the right to consign all others to a slow and bumpy road. Now, our broadband providers will tell you they will never do these things. They say, just trust us. But know this, they have the technical ability and business incentive to discriminate and manipulate your internet traffic. And now this agency gives them the legal green light to go ahead and do so. This is not good. Not good for consumers, not good for businesses, not good for anyone who connects and creates online. Not good for the democratizing force that depends on openness to thrive. Moreover, it is not good for American leadership on the global stage of our new and complex digital world. I'm not alone with these concerns. Everyone from the creator of the World Wide Web to religious leaders, to governors and mayors of big cities and small towns, to musicians, to actors, to actresses, to entrepreneurs and academics and activists have registered their upset and anger. They are reeling at how this agency could make this kind of mistake. They are wondering how it could be so tone-deaf. And they are justifiably concerned that just a few unelected officials could make such a vast and far-reaching decision about the future of the internet. So after erasing our net neutrality rules, what is left? What recourse do consumers have? We're told, don't worry, competition will save us. But the FCC's own data show that our broadband markets are not competitive. Half the households in this country have no choice of broadband provider. So if your broadband provider is blocking websites, you have no recourse. You have nowhere to go. We're told, don't worry, the Federal Trade Commission will save us. But the FTC is not the expert agency for communications. It has authority over unfair and deceptive practices. But to evade FTC review, all any broadband provider will need to do is add new provisions to the fine print in its terms of service. In addition, it is both costly and impractical to report difficulties to the FTC. By the time the FTC gets around to addressing them in court proceedings or enforcement actions, it's fair to assume that the startups and small businesses wrestling with discriminatory treatment could be long gone. Moreover, what little authority the FTC has is now under question in the courts. We're told, don't worry, state authorities will save us. But at the same time, the FCC all but clears the field with sweeping preemption of anything that resembles state or local consumer protection. If the substance that got us to this point is bad, the process is even worse. Let's talk about the public record. The public has been making noise, speaking up, raising a ruckus. We see it in the protests across this country, those that are outside here today, and we see it how they have lit up our phone lines, clogged our email inboxes, and jammed our online comment system. Now that might be messy, but whatever our disagreements are on this dais, I hope we can agree that that is democracy in action and something we can all support. To date, nearly 24 million comments have been filed in this proceeding. There is no record in the history of this agency that has attracted so many filings. But there's something foul in this record. 2 million comments feature stolen identities. 500,000 comments are from Russian email addresses. 50,000 consumer complaints are inexplicably missing from the record. I think that's a problem. I think our record has been corrupted and our process for public participation lacks integrity. 19 state attorneys general agree. They have written us demanding we halt our vote until we investigate and get to the bottom of this mess. Identity theft is a crime under state and federal law. And while it is taking place, this agency has turned a blind eye to its victims and callously told our fellow law enforcement officials it will not help. This is not acceptable. It's a stain on the FCC and this proceeding. This issue is not going away. It needs to be addressed. Finally, I worry that this decision and the process that brought us to this point is ugly. It's ugly in the cavalier disregard this agency has demonstrated to the public, the contempt it has shown for citizens who speak up, and the sheer disdain it has for public opinion. Unlike its predecessors, this FCC has not held a single public hearing on net neutrality. There is no shortage of people who believe Washington is not listening to their concerns, their fears, and their desires. Add this agency to that list. Now, I too am frustrated, but here's a twist. I hear you. I listen to what the callers to my office are saying. I read the countless individually written emails in my inbox, the posts online, and the very short and sometimes very long letters. And I'm not going to give up. And neither should you. If the arc of history is long, we are going to bend this toward a more just outcome. In the courts, in Congress, wherever we need to go to ensure that net neutrality stays the law of the land. Because if you are conservative or progressive, you benefit from internet openness. If you come from a small town or a big city, you benefit from internet openness. If you are a company or a nonprofit, you benefit from internet openness. If you are a startup or an established business, you benefit from internet openness. If you are a consumer or a creator, you benefit from internet openness. And if you believe in democracy, you benefit from internet openness. So let's persist, let's fight, let's not stop here or now. It's too important. The future depends on it.
Thank you, Commissioner. The internet is the greatest free market innovation in history. It's changed the way we live, the way we play, the way we work, the way we learn, the way we speak. During my time at the FCC, I've met with entrepreneurs in South Dakota who've started businesses. I've met with doctors in Ohio who have helped care for patients. I've met with teachers in Alaska who have educated their students. I've met with farmers in Missouri who have increased their crop yields. And I've met with many more who have succeeded, all because of the internet. And the internet has enriched my own life immeasurably. In the past few days alone, I've set up a FaceTime call with my parents and kids. I've downloaded interesting podcasts about blockchain technology. I've ordered a burrito. I've managed my playoff-bound fantasy football team. And, as many of you might have seen, I've tweeted. What is responsible for the phenomenal development of the internet? Well, it certainly wasn't heavy-handed government regulation. Quite to the contrary. At the dawn of the commercial internet, President Clinton and a Republican Congress agreed that it would be the policy of the United States to, and I quote, preserve the vibrant and competitive free market that presently exists for the internet, unfettered by federal and state regulation. This bipartisan policy worked. Encouraged by light touch regulation, America's private sector invested over $1.5 trillion to build out fixed and mobile networks throughout the United States. 28K modems gave way to gigabit fiber. Innovators and entrepreneurs grew startups into global giants, and America's internet economy became the envy of the entire world. And this light touch approach was good for consumers, too. In a free market full of permissionless innovation, online services blossomed. Within a generation, we have gone from email as the killer app to high-definition video streaming. Entrepreneurs and innovators guided the internet far better than the clumsy hand of government ever could have. But then, in early 2015, the FCC, under political pressure, jettisoned the successful bipartisan approach to the internet. On express orders from the previous White House, the FCC scrapped the tried and true light touch regulation of the internet and replaced it with heavy-handed micromanagement. It decided to subject the internet to utility-style regulation, designed in the 1930s to govern Ma Bell. This decision was a mistake. For one thing, there was no problem to solve. The internet wasn't broken in 2015. We were not living in some digital dystopia. To the contrary, the internet is one thing, perhaps the only thing in American society that we can all agree has been a stunning success. Not only was there no problem, this solution hasn't worked. The main complaint consumers have about the internet is not and has never been that their internet service provider is blocking access to content. It's that they don't have access at all or not enough competition. These regulations have ironically taken us in the opposite direction from these consumer preferences. Under Title II, investment in high-speed networks has declined by billions of dollars. Notably, this is the first time that such investment has declined outside of a recession in the internet era. When there is less investment, that means fewer next generation's networks are built. That means less access and less competition. That means fewer jobs for Americans building those networks. And that means more Americans are stranded on the wrong side of the digital divide. And the impact has been particularly serious for smaller internet service providers. They don't have the time, the money, or the lawyers to navigate a thicket of complex rules. Now, they don't get a lot of press, certainly not here in Washington. But I've personally visited some of them, from Spencer Municipal Utilities in Spencer, Iowa, to Wave Wireless in Parsons, Kansas. I have personally spoken with many more, from Amplex Internet in Ohio to Airlink Services in Oklahoma. And so it is no surprise that the Wireless Internet Service Providers Association, which represents very small fixed wireless companies that typically operate in rural and low-income urban areas, surveyed its members and found that over 80%, quote, incurred additional expense in complying with the Title II rules, had delayed or reduced network expansion, had delayed or reduced services, and had allocated budget to comply with the rules. Other small companies, too, have told the FCC that these regulations have forced them to cancel, delay, or curtail fiber network upgrades. And nearly 24 small providers submitted a letter saying that the FCC's heavy-handed rules affect our ability to find financing. Now remember, these are not the big guys. These are the small companies, the kinds of companies that are critical to providing a more competitive marketplace. Now these rules have also impeded innovation. One major company, for instance, reported that it put on hold a project to build out its out-of-home Wi-Fi network due to uncertainty about the FCC's regulatory stance. And a coalition of 19 municipal internet service providers, that is, city government-owned nonprofits, have told the FCC that they, and I quote, often delay or hold off from rolling out a new feature or service because they cannot afford to deal with a potential complaint and enforcement action. None of this is good for consumers. We need to empower all Americans with digital opportunity, not deny them the benefits of greater access and competition. And consider, too, that these are just the effects that these rules have had on the internet of today. Think about how they will affect the internet that we need 10, 20 years from now. The digital world bears no resemblance to a water pipe or an electric line or a sewer. The use of those pipes will be roughly constant over time. Very few would say that there's been dramatic innovation in these areas. By contrast, online traffic is exploding, and we consume exponentially more traffic and data over time. With the dawn of the Internet of Things, with the development of high bitrate applications like virtual reality, with new activities that we can't fully grasp yet, like high-volume Bitcoin mining, we are imposing ever more demands on the network. And over time, that means our networks themselves will need to scale too. On advice of security, we need to take a brief recess.